Hey, good morning, everybody. This is John. Just making sure the sound's okay. Uh, so, welcome to week 7. It's hard to believe that we're actually have already made it this far. So, we're at the very tail end. We have two more assignments, two more final versions of the two projects, milestone projects that we've been working on this class, and so we're just about there, right before all the holiday season. So all my kids are in the middle of finals. My wife, who's actually in her last prereq right now to before she applies for nursing school, she has her final today actually. So we're in full finals mode, getting everything wrapped up in terms of school, and obviously we are as well in this class. So congrats to all of you for getting this far and trudging through some of this material, and which I recognize is not easy and not always intuitive. So good job on that. There are a couple things that I want to touch base on this week. First, with respect to the this final milestone project that is due at the end of the week. So that's on the iTeraldi case. If we harken back to some of our discussion at the beginning of this class, we talked about how there are two distinct components that we are going to study with respect to that case, right? So there was the legal component where we discussed the legal issues, the legal components, the elements. We analyzed that. And then the second part of that is the ethics piece, in which we just got done with. And just a reminder, as you guys were putting the final touches on this milestone, this final draft of the milestone, remember that in the legal component section, that is the place for us to lay out the legal issues, the elements for the issues. So, I mean, the big one, right, is, as we all recognize, is the malpractice issue. This is the place to lay out that analysis in the legal component section. So, what's the issue? What are the rules? And remember that the negligence or malpractice consists of 4 elements. The four D's, as the text refers to it. And each one of those elements has its own rule. So what's the issue? What's the rule for that element? Apply specific facts. There's real power in using facts from the case and applying that to the rule. So apply the facts and come out with your conclusion. So for the first one, we know that the first element of a negligence or malpractice case is a duty. What is the rule? The rule is that a duty is created when that physician-patient relationship is formed. Well, what facts from the case demonstrate that occurred or didn't occur? And so lay that out, apply the facts to the rule, come out with your conclusion, either yes or no as to the duty, and then move on to the next element. So once you've completed that analysis on all 4 of those elements, you can say, and in conclusion, yeah, there was malpractice or not malpractice, whatever you come out with. So the key is the analysis piece. On the ethics side, there aren't really rules, right? So there's no rule in terms of ethics, and so like in the guidelines section, where you propose guidelines, ethical guidelines, and you defend them. There are really no rules to use here, but there are principles and theories that we've studied. So if you look back at some of the principles that we studied in week 1, even autonomy, beneficence, non-malfeasance, those are principles. The theories, I know there's a specific section on the ethics piece on what theory you would use to address the issues, but the theories like virtue-based theory, duty-based theory, rights-based theory, utilitarianism, those are theories that you would use. So use those to your benefit, use those in your analysis, and I think it'll make for a stronger analysis. So enough on that. What's the difference between ethical and legal issues? I think the way I would answer that is with a question. Can you? The question is, can you do everything ethically? Like let's say in the Itraldi case, can Dr. Rickinson, if he had done everything ethically, perfectly ethically, complied with his professional code of conduct, the AMA code of ethics, or consider yourself as a healthcare practitioner. If you do everything in an ethical manner, comply with all ethical um, codes of conduct, can you still be can you still have exposure or risk of exposure or potential liability for malpractice or for legal? Can you have some sort of legal liability, malpractice, negligence, whatever it may be? And the answer to that is yes. You can act perfectly ethically and still meet one of the perhaps somehow you breach the standard of care in performing some sort of healthcare service and still have risk of exposure in terms of legal liability under malpractice. So there's a big difference between ethics and legal liability, and the analysis is a bit different as well. So breaching or deviating from the standard of care in treating somebody is not in and of itself unethical. It's potentially negligent if the other elements are met, but you can act perfectly ethically and still have legal liability. So there is a difference there. As we look at the discussion question for this week, it's an interesting one, and it asks you, what is, and I'll bring it up here. Can you have a conflict between your own personal position on a certain issue and what you're required to do from a professional perspective? So can there be a conflict sometimes in what your personal beliefs are with what you're responsible for, perhaps under some sort of professional code of conduct or ethics or policy or something like that? And sometimes I think that our personal position can conflict. Take my profession, for example. I'm a lawyer, and I don't do criminal law, but I think a lot of times criminal defense lawyers get a bad rap because they defend potentially some pretty bad people and some bad criminals, and you think, why on earth would you do that? And that maybe their personal position is that what they did was wrong. Stealing things or murdering people is wrong, but they have a professional responsibility to give them due process and to provide them with an adequate defense. So I think there are times when that can happen. Are we does that make us terrible people for compromising, or are we compromising our personal ethics? I don't know that we are, but that's something for discussion, debate. We're all, as licensed practitioners, whether it's in healthcare or law or whatever it may be, we're all governed by a particular rule of law or code of ethics. And if we put this in another context that I like, a police officer may personally believe that a law he or she is required to enforce is wrong, but under the code of conduct for the police force, the officer is required to obey all lawful and reasonable instructions to enforce the law, unless there's sufficient cause to do so otherwise. So that can give rise to some conflict, and the question is, how do we deal with that? And so that's sort of the precursor or the premise for the discussion question this week. And I think it's a good question, especially for this class as we think about healthcare law, healthcare ethics. Most of us are licensed practitioners. Most of you in the class are licensed practitioners in the healthcare space. How do you handle something like that? How do you deal with what you believe to be ethical or unethical, and whether or not that conflicts with applicable law or your applicable professional code of conduct? So that's a great way to end here. The one thing that I will, as we move into the final drafts of these two milestone projects, one word of warning, and I give this to all the classes that I teach, is this week 7 and then week 8. Next week, as we turn in final drafts of assignments that we've already submitted, one thing I would just be careful of, and some students have done this before, which is, if you got a good grade on the rough draft, let's say you got an A or A minus or B plus, whatever, and you're happy with that grade, I would caution you not to just resubmit that same paper and expect to get the same grade for two reasons. Number one, if you look at the rubric, and I'm sure you've gathered by now that pretty much I just kind of go from section to section on the rubric. If you look at the rubric for, especially for this week 7, the final draft of the Itraldi case, the rubric is very different. So it's much more detailed. It's broken down into quite a few more sections, and the requirements are slightly different. So don't just assume that you can put the legal part and the ethical part, mash them together and turn it in with the same outcome. Now you could do that, but there's no guarantee you'll get the same outcome in terms of a grade. So the second reason is in terms of, in all aspects of my life, I am human and make mistakes. And so that's particularly true with grading. And hopefully that's minimized, and I don't do that. But there could be things that I've missed or didn't miss in your rough draft that I may miss or not miss in the final draft. And so I would not just expect that everything's going to be perfectly the same in terms of grading and outcome, and for those two reasons. So please just, I'll give you the same advice that I give for all the assignments in the class, and that is just go look at the rubric requirement and follow that as perfectly as you can, and that is probably your best bet in terms of grading is concerned. So I know this is a crazy time of year, and I commend you for for everything that you're able to do here. I will say on this ethics assignment that I graded recently for the Itraldi case, collectively as a class, you guys did great. It was really good. Very well written, laid out very well. I was very impressed. So great work. Keep developing those sections in each one of those assignments in the rubric, and keep moving forward. So great job. And if you have any questions, anything at all, please, I am around. Please feel free to reach out to me, email, text, call, whatever it may be. So hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.